Okay, so the recording and the transcription have started, and as ever, the recordings will be available on the YouTube channel, which is up to date, I have to say. I'm managing to keep up with it almost all the time. Now we're at the first week of the month. Okay, so we started talking last week about compliance, and we looked at what we meant by compliance, and we also looked a little at how we could then set up internal controls to ensure that we were complying with legislation. Today, I want to have a wee look at another way that we can ensure that we are complying with legislation. Because what I want to look at today is codes of conduct. Now, the idea here is that we have somewhere written down a code of conduct for our employees to follow. What that means is that anyone who is one of our employees, or actually anyone who we contract or perhaps work with, knows what our code of conduct is, how we want to work within our organization, the standards that we expect from people. And what that does is it allows us to write down somewhere where we can let all of these people know what standards they're expected to comply with, and that can include legislative standards. So it puts a code in place somewhere. And if anyone has any questions about what they're doing, whether it's appropriate, then these codes of conduct are the place to go to understand how we should approach them. This isn't a new idea. People have had codes of conduct for, well, millennia, actually. It's not a new idea. All it is saying, well, these are the things we want you to do, so let's write them down somewhere. And you can see some religious codes of conduct there. But other organizations take on the same idea. So solicitors have a set of standards, or bankers, or elected officials. So here, for example, are the standards for solicitors in Scotland. And I don't think anybody would take any issue with them. Solicitors must act with honesty and integrity, must keep clients' business confidential, must work in your client's best interests. I mean, these aren't exactly earth-shattering, but it does make it clear the standards that they're expected to comply with. And of course, if they don't, then that means they can be struck off. They can stop being solicitors if they don't follow this set of standards. Bankers have similar things, but for bankers, it's voluntary. If you don't follow the banker's code, you're not struck off as a banker. And you might want to consider whether this is a good or a bad thing. And you can see there the reason that they've given for making it voluntary. It allows competition and market forces to operate to encourage higher standards. And again, you might want to consider whether market forces encourage higher standards or whether they might encourage a race to the bottom. you could make an argument for either. Elected people have codes of conduct as well. So if you're elected to public office, there will be a code of conduct that you're expected to follow. Now, sorry, I thought I'd brought it up earlier. One of the things that I wanted to point out about the code of conduct is simply its length. The Scottish Council's code of conduct is 34 pages long. All of the things you must do, all of the things you can't do, and what will happen to you if you don't comply with this. It's massive. And it's enforced by law. If you don't comply with this code of conduct, be removed from office. MPs at Westminster also have a code of conduct. And there are similar things in it, but I think it's interesting that the code of conduct for MPs isn't as strict as the code of conduct for Scottish local government councillors. And you might want to consider whether that's a good thing or a bad thing and why it's ended up like that. But the general principles, again, are not unreasonable. Take decisions solely in terms of the public interest. Don't place themselves under any financial or other obligations to outside individuals. Make choices on merit. Be accountable, be open, be honest, and show leadership. And again, you might want to consider whether or not that actually happens. And these things are important. It's important to have the code. It's important to have a set of standards that people can follow. But of course, they're not a panacea. Simply having the code of conduct doesn't mean that people will follow it. And it's up to you to decide whether or not, for example, you think MPs have made decisions solely in terms of public interest. I couldn't possibly comment. But what I think is fair to say that standards are absolutely set from the top. And we've talked about this before when we talked about governance. If we want an organisation to behave in a particular way, to take a particular approach, to do things in a particular manner, then of course what you want to do is make sure that the people at the top of that organisation are doing exactly that as well. Because if they don't, it's unlikely that other people in the organisation will follow those codes of conduct. And of course, even where codes of conduct exist, and we've looked at Scottish solicitors, there's a similar code of conduct for accountants. That didn't stop Arthur Anderson going bust. And again, we talked about that earlier in this module. So it's not just about having the code of conduct. It's not just about saying that, yes, we have this in place. It's about living up to it. You have to tell people what the code of conduct is. You have to enforce that code of conduct, and you have to check that they have complied with it. Almost like governance, risk and compliance. Some are larger, some are shorter, some go heavy on some aspects than others, but all of them are there in order to ensure that the people working with the organisation are held to the highest standards. And I've given you examples here of people who work with the public or elected by the public, but of course, private companies have these codes of conduct as well. And as I mentioned before, it's often difficult to access these things. Organisations quite often see them as private. As before, GSK has made theirs available. So they made the code of conduct public, and one of the things you'll often see is, as well as a code of conduct, that conduct will be codified in a set of policies. Equal and inclusive treatment of employees, anti-bribery, binding corporate rules, third-party oversight. So these are policies that employees should have access to, should be aware of, and should follow. Because we just said that they need to be communicated, enforced, and checked. And all organisations do that. We are all on this Teams call. So every single one of you is subject to multiple policies as students, codes of conduct on engagement or plagiarism or whatever it happens to be. And today, right at this moment, you have agreed to abide by the university's acceptable use policy for computers. So you're not an employee of the organisation, but you're still bound by the code of conduct of that organisation. And you'll quite often see that. You'll see organisations say that if they have a supplier, that they have to be prepared to be bound by the procurer's code of conduct to ensure that they're not dealing with people that they wouldn't want to deal with. And I did say today was going to be a short lecture, and that was it. Does anyone have any questions just now? While you're thinking about that, one of the things you should be thinking of for your tutorial, and of course, that will then feed into your final assessment, is to have a look at some of these codes of conduct. And I've pointed to some of them, and there's documents available on OneNote. But there are plenty of others if there's ones for your organisation or an organisation in which you're interested. Feel free to use those instead. But have a look at them and just compare them. Are there any similar things or any differences? And have a think about why those similarities exist, why the differences are there. And in essence, what goes to make up a good code of conduct. Okay, I'm still not seeing any questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, and I'm not seeing any hands.
Excuse me, Tony, I think I have a question.
Yeah.
For you, what is the main point that for the creation of a complete code of conduct? What should be the main characteristic?
The recognition that there is no single characteristic that would make up a good code of conduct. It's about balancing them. It's about taking all those different things and using all of them. So if we just look at GSK, if GSK took away any of these things here, then it would stop being a good code of conduct. Having said that, there might be some things that some organisations have to do, like a third-party oversight programme, that others don't, so they might not be required. So it will absolutely depend on the organisation, the kind of business it's in, the people it does business with. All of that kind of stuff feeds into what's a good code of conduct for that organisation. Of course, that's exactly why I want you to look at multiple organisations and think about what the similarities are and what the differences are. Why some people might have specific things. And you will always see things like, wrong document. You will always see things like this. You'll always see things like honesty and integrity. You'll always see things like confidentiality. But I'm not entirely sure that Money Musk will provide a legal service, so it wouldn't be appropriate for their code of conduct, which is why I'm saying recognise that they are different and that they have different approaches depending on the organisation itself. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Anything else just now? Okay, let me stop the recording.